Welcome to Bring the World Home. This is a program about returned Peace Corps volunteers talking about their experiences overseas. I'm Jerry Jobs. I served in Gabon from 82 to 84, and I'm here to interview Ann Hartman, who was in Pakistan and Bulgaria from 91 to 93. Ann also spent some time later as a Peace Corps staff in Uzbekistan, so she has some experiences she can compare. First of all, let's take a look at the globe and see where Bulgaria is in relationship to Hawaii. So if we start here and go around across the U.S., across the Atlantic, to Bulgaria, which is just north of Turkey. And can you tell us about the borders, the bordering?
Sure. So Bulgaria is situated, they call themselves the crossroads between Europe and Asia. And you can see why. They are situated just north of Turkey, which is mostly in Asia, north of Greece. They border the former Yugoslavia to the west, which is now broken up into a number of countries. Macedonia and Serbia border Bulgaria. And to the north is Romania, and its eastern border is the Black Sea.
I must say I had to go look up some things about Bulgaria when I knew I was going to interview you. I guess it's about the size of Ohio, and it has a climate that is cold and hot. And when I looked at it, I was surprised because many Peace Corps countries, first of all, they're not in this northern band of the world, which has been largely industrialized. And so people talk about the north-south divide, and so there's a sense that the north is kind of all okay and the south is poorer and less developed. Also, in the more developed countries, change comes fairly rapidly. In Peace Corps countries, not only were they poor, but they were slower to change. And so I know you thought about these things and questioned yourself, why is Peace Corps there? Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. I did think a lot about that as we went through, when I was assigned there. As you mentioned, I had been in Pakistan, and that was maybe a more traditional Peace Corps country in many respects. And then was...
Why did you leave? What happened?
Well, we left Pakistan. I was there actually the summer of 1990 to 1991, January, and that was because of the first Persian Gulf War. We were evacuated when the U.S. Challenged Saddam Hussein and went into Iraq. So many Muslim countries were evacuated at that time. And so we were sent home and were offered different posts in different parts of the world, and I was offered Bulgaria. And I think it couldn't have been a bigger contrast, actually, in terms of a Peace Corps experience. As you mentioned, Bulgaria is European. It considers itself European. It has... It's quite developed. It has a very high literacy rate.
Wasn't it like 98?
About 98% literacy. And so I did question why are we going to these countries? And I think, I think what I came to as a volunteer there was that, as a volunteer in Pakistan and some other parts of the world, I really thought about, am I going in and trying to convert these people to Western ideas and make them, force people to change? Am I, I kind of questioned, like, why am I there? Do they want me there? Are we needed? And in Bulgaria, I think we were really needed and really wanted. Bulgaria was changing and was changing dramatically.
What was the impetus for this change?
Well, that's a good question. In 1989, the very end of 1989, Bulgaria, like many other countries in Eastern Europe, the communist leadership in the countries fell. In Bulgaria, it was very peaceful. It was not, there were not major riots and things like in Poland and some of the other countries. It was a very peaceful turnover of power, but it left Bulgaria free from the Soviet Union for the first time since the late 50s. So So Bulgaria was figuring out what kind of country it was going to be, what kind of government it was going to have, what kind of economy it was going to have. Basically, everything changed overnight.
And so the Peace Corps' role there was?
The Peace Corps went in with two projects. One was English teaching, and that was the first project. That was in 1991 with the group that I was with. So we were English teachers in the high schools, and we were also teacher trainers. When the change happened, English was seen by many in Bulgaria as the way to reach out and join the rest of the world, finally, at long last, after 50 years of isolation. So it was seen as their way to move forward and develop and to reconnect with.
Had they learned Russian before?
They had learned Russian previously. They had learned Bulgarian. Bulgarian is the national language.
Are there many different groups in Bulgaria, or are they like all Bulgarians, or?
Mostly Bulgarians, and mostly they speak Bulgarian language. So there are other ethnic groups. There are ethnic Turks, and there are Roma, which is known in the West as gypsies. And there is a significant number of Turks in Bulgaria because of the Turkish occupation of previous centuries. And there was some forced assimilation and things like that going on, but for the most part, it's fairly heterogeneous, and they speak Bulgarian. So, but during the when they were under the Soviet Union, they learned Russian language in school, and most older Bulgarians speak Russian quite well because they were basically forced to learn it, and that was the language that people learned.
So Bulgaria felt a little bit marginalized from Europe, although they felt European. Is that what you mean? They were on the edge of two worlds in a way.
Yeah, they were on the edge of two worlds, and they really did see themselves as part of Europe, and they still see themselves as part of Europe. And I think when the wall came down and Bulgarians saw for the first time maybe what Europe, the rest of Europe, Western Europe was like, there was a lot of bitterness and feeling that could have been us, that was our right place, and we should have been there, and that we had 40 years of being held back, and basically 40 lost years, 45 plus lost years of development, when they feel like they either stood still or went backwards, or weren't able to join in the progress of Europe, and really they didn't have information. I mean, information was controlled, so during the 45 years of communism, they didn't know what was happening in Western Europe. So it wasn't until, and there was some information, but it really wasn't until the wall came down that the information flooded over the borders, and for the first time people were seeing and understanding that, they had been told by their government that they were far more advanced than the West, that they had, were...
Lies.
Yeah, right. I mean, they had more progress, and even, it's interesting, even the literature in the high schools was very carefully selected to be people like Dickens and others who were very critical of the capitalist system and very critical of the West, and talked a lot about, sweatshops and things like that, and slavery and how bad slavery was, and how slaves were treated in the United States. So the propaganda was very strong and very pervasive, and until the change happened, people didn't really realize, I think.
And so, turning a minute to Bulgaria, you said it's about the size of Ohio, and can you tell us a little about the climate and the geography?
I would love to. It's a beautiful country. It's Bulgarians say it's a little piece of heaven at the corner of Europe, but it's got plains, it's got forests, beautiful forests. It has the Black Sea coast, which has beaches that are frequented by people throughout Eastern Europe, but also Western Europe. It has beautiful mountains in the south, which are the Rhodope Mountains, that also border Turkey and Greece. And through the middle runs the Danube River, ends its trek through Europe, right through the middle of, it runs through the northern border between Romania. So the Danube forms the northern border with Romania. And through the middle of the country is the old Balkan Mountains.
And
the
so
star
when
planet.
you got there, what did you think? When you looked around, what?
Well, when I got there,
You did your training near Sofia,
I did my
right?
training near Sofia, which is the capital.
Yeah.
And it was a small, what they call resort town. And I kind of put resort in quotes because if you were to go there, it wouldn't look really like a resort town to you. It's, you know, in the Soviet Union, there was a lot of construction, and the buildings are all made in kind of a similar way. And you see, I think we've all seen a lot of these on TV when you see pictures of Eastern Europe. And you know, I think the images were always that it was kind of gray and
Big gray buildings.
big gray concrete buildings.
That was the resort you were in?
And that was really the resort. Was there, and very few
And so,
amenities that we would know
yeah.
of in the West. And but it was. So you know, Bulgaria it's a hard place to describe because it has both. It has what I think is what the communism put there, which is the big block buildings, and in that sense there's a lot of ugliness, shall we say, a lot of factories, a lot of industrialization that just doesn't look very nice.
In contrast with the natural
in contrast
beauty.
with the natural environment, which is just incredible. It's just
Tell us about your
so
assignment in
beautiful.
your town.
I was assigned to a town called Stara Zagora. It's in the middle of the country, just south of the Balkan Mountains that run through the middle. It's about 180,000 people, but it's the 6th largest city in Bulgaria.
And tell us what that name means. I love that.
Yes, Stara Zagora means old wheat. So Zagora is actually an old word for wheat, and but it's in a plain area. So we were driving through on the train from Sofia, and suddenly I said to my husband, "I'm back in the Midwest," because it looked like cornfields and wheat fields and basically kind of a Kansas or a Nebraska look, just in this area here where.
And you told me that Bulgaria is kind of the breadbasket of.
Well, it's partly, it has a lot of grains, but it's really known for its fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
It has incredible markets, and it's cherries and grapes and other kinds of, all the fruits, tomatoes. So it really used to supply all the fruits and vegetables to most of Russia and Eastern Europe.
Oh, wow.
So each country in the former Soviet Union kind of had its role to play in the big market structure of the Union, and one of Bulgaria's roles was to produce fruits and vegetables. And
So can you tell us about your teaching?
I would love to. I was a teacher at a high school. I was assigned to a math and science high school, so it was a specialized high school. And I taught, my first year I taught what's called 8th preparatory, and they added an extra 8th grade class called the preparatory year, or the preparation year, in which the students had 20 hours a week of English language in order
That's
to
all they
really
did.
get intensive. Yeah, you know, they had an hour of math, and you know, they still had math and science and everything, but the majority of their classes were English classes. So so I taught that in joint classes with another teacher. So me and another teacher taught. I taught about 24 hours a week of classes, and I had 4 different sections of 8th graders. So, and then my second year I taught 11th grade and 10th grade classes, and they only had English once a week.
Oh, so
I mean,
that's
once a day. I'm sorry,
Once a
not
day.
once a day. Yeah,
Once a
20
day.
hours a week, but 5 hours a week.
So by the time they got up there, they were really reading literature and
They were
getting
reading
very
literature.
good at English.
I think this is one of the other distinctions of being a volunteer in Bulgaria, was that the level of English language teaching was very high. You know, we finished all of English grammar in the preparatory year. They had covered almost all English grammar.
So these were very good students.
So these were very good students, and it was very high level teaching, very complex grammatical points. And so, you know, I had a friend of mine who was teaching in Nepal, and she was also an English teacher, and she wrote me a letter and said, you know, today I taught my students how to draw their J's below the line. I thought, I'm teaching future perfect continuous tense, you know, and very complicated things.
So you found the level of education amazingly good there, didn't you?
The level of education for the students in my school was very high. I brought I had some calculus textbooks brought from the United States, university level. Just we were trying to get resources, any kind of English resources. There was nothing printed in English except for these very old propaganda textbooks that have a lot of. So we were trying to get resources, and some of them were university textbooks. And my students saw I think it was a second-year calculus textbook for college level, and they said, "Oh, we did that last year."
Yeah.
These were 10th grade students, so it's very high level, and in spite of the fact that the schools are in very poor condition, and you know, these students learn in spite of the fact that there were very few windows. A lot of the windows were broken out, so in the winter we were wearing big coats and gloves all day and hats, and that's how students would cut the fingers off their gloves so they could write. And
so what was it like living there? What was your social world? Could you develop a social life there, or what was it like after teaching hours?
After hours, well, we were very busy because there was everybody wanted to befriend the Peace Corps volunteers in some ways. I think people saw us as I was reading one of my letters, and one of my friends said, you're proof, even though we don't feel that our political system is giving us any democracy right now, you're proof that there has been some change. So in some ways we were proof to them, in the old times, there's no way that an American could ever have been in their homes, or, if they had an American in their homes, they would have been questioned by the police afterwards, and it would have been very dangerous for them.
So, but you went back there as a trainer after you finished, and so did you see change?
Oh, yeah. Dramatic change. In the country.
In the country.
It took a long time, and I think, I look at places like Iraq right now and other places, and it's, it took Bulgaria really 12 years before democracy and, a real process could kind of take hold and
be institutionalized.
Yeah, and even now, people really question, and I think people really questioned there. There was the initial euphoria of the change in 1989 and 90, and even in my 2 years there, from 91 to 93, I really saw that hope just diminish to despair and frustration, and is this what it's supposed to be? Is this democracy?
You mentioned shortages.
Well, that was part of the problem, and it was a problem before the changes happened. It was sort of an indication that the Soviet system was starting to break down, but there were a lot of shortages of goods, basic goods: flour, butter, sugar, oil, milk. A friend of mine, her day, before I even got there, her day started at 2 or 3 a.m. She had a small baby, to go out, get in line to wait for milk. She would wait in one line maybe for 3 hours, only to get to the front, and they would run out. And she would run across town to another place and get in another line and wait. And so this was sort of the
Were the Bulgarians fairly placid peaceful about these things, or how did they look at their situation?
Yeah, why didn't they get frustrated?
Yeah.
I was frustrated. I was like, let's rise up, let's do something. It was, they would always say to me, well, we're a peaceful people. And I think it was a combination of that and 45 years of Soviet rule where you didn't rise up and there was no community action for change. So that whole concept that as a citizen or as a community member you could make some change in your society was really non-existent. It was not there. And that also made our job harder too, because you were trying to, even though things were changing, and it was a very dynamic place and very exciting, because of that, people didn't, the idea of let's get involved in our community, let's volunteer. Basically, you kind of kept your head down. In the old days, you just kept your head down and you did what you had to do, and that was it. You didn't want to be the mole that popped its head up because you might get it whacked down. But
let's take a look at some of the old-fashioned things, some of the crafts that you were so fascinated with. I would like you to show some of the things that you brought today.
I would love to. And, I kind of have described some of the sadder aspects of Bulgaria, but it's a beautiful country. And I'll first of all say you can imagine just verdant green forests and hills. And then in the contrast to that are the textiles and a lot of the handicrafts, which are this brilliant red. And this is very Bulgarian typical colors. You'll see it in everything that I have here. But this embroidery is one of the things that Bulgaria is very famous for. And I met many people who had come from the West to Bulgaria to try to buy these handicrafts once the country opened to the West. And they just said, this is, incredible embroidery. So this is a tablecloth that I purchased.
It's handmade. Huh?
It's
Yeah,
all hand done, and
let's look at the back for those people who are aficionados.
Right, you can see.
It's wonderful. It's really
beautiful.
incredible. Yeah, and then also some crochet work here.
They do a lot of crochet, especially again the older women. I fear that it's a dying art, but doilies. There are lots of these kinds of doilies and crochet work, and then. Finally, they do some kilims, which are a type of carpet, and this is an example of one. Again, you see the red color, and everything red and white are really seen as the colors of life. And they actually have a spring holiday for the beginning of spring, which is called Martinitsas, and you give little threads of white and red to your friends, and you wear them around for the day. So there's a color of spring and rejuvenation and life. And
is this wool?
This is wool.
So they have sheep in the mountains, or?
Oh, many sheep.
Many sheep.
Yeah, sheep.
Okay.
In fact, sheep's milk is one of the. If we were to talk about food, sheep's milk and goat's milk, yogurt and cheese are two of the real delicacies, I would say, of Bulgaria and in Bulgarian
Let's talk
cuisine.
about food.
Why not talk about food? I think as Peace Corps volunteers, we're always so focused on food, but the food was incredible. I mean, in spite of shortages, it's the food is delicious food. It has hints of Greek food and Turkish food. There's a lot of influences that come from the whole region. But as I said, yogurt, they actually have a bacteria that is, Bulgaria is known for yogurt. That is one of the best in the world. And we had white, like feta cheese, a brined cheese, and then there's a yellow, kind of more of a hard cheese. And so cheese, dairy products were a big part of the culture.
We're starting to wind up now, so I want to ask you a few more personal things. What were the high points, or what did you especially get out of this experience?
Well, it's an amazing experience, I think, as all Peace Corps volunteers know, and it changes you forever. And I think I got so much from the Bulgarian people, their energy, their ability to laugh through all of their hardships and difficulties. And also, I think, a good sense that, their rules changed overnight for them, and everything they had known about their lives that was true and real was gone. And I think that we all have to be ready for anything, and to watch them and try to figure out where they were going after that kind of dramatic shift. I think I say to myself, okay, what would I do if suddenly it doesn't matter if you have a master's degree or these kinds of education? And so I think I have just a much broader, I just have a very rich perspective, I think, on the world and what it's like to experience such a dramatic change when every rule that you've ever known, the rug gets pulled out from under you, and you say, oh, okay, now what?
Yeah, there's something I forgot to ask you about, and that's about national parks. You mentioned something.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Bulgaria has an incredible natural beauty, and the people really, I think this is one of the things that sustained them through all these years, was being able to go to these parks, and they've done a fabulous job of keeping the nature pristine and creating parks and putting, they have huts and things in the mountains where you can go and hike. And so I would say, from a tourist perspective, people should go there and go hiking and see the nature. It's incredible, and the parks are really amazing. It's a beautiful place. And there are mountains, as I said, there are huts you can go to and get your meals overnight and stay overnight. So you don't even have to have tents. You can just go on in.
So you traveled around a bit then when you
I
were
did.
there.
I've been to the seaside. There are gorgeous seaside towns, ancient. The Greeks have been in Bulgaria. Bulgaria's a crossroads because the Greeks have passed through, and the Romans have passed through, and the Turks have passed through, and each has left an indelible print on the culture, and
Mhm.
so you have old Roman towns and ancient Greek towns, and a lot of Turkish influence. So
Mhm.
I've been to the coast, I've been to the south and north.
Uh-huh.
And it's all beautiful.
That's great. And as far as what happened to you in the future, can you just summarize a little bit how this was a part of your today?
Oh, it's always a part of my today. I
Yeah.
think you never, somebody said, you never love another country like you love your
Yeah.
Peace Corps country. And, but when I left Bulgaria, I was really inspired to look at education and what is education and what makes good education, in a
Mhm.
school where there were no resources and no windows even, and, barely a chalkboard to write on. Students learned, and they learned well.
Mhm.
So I pursued a degree in education, and then went on to work for Peace Corps for a number of years in Uzbekistan.
Mhm. And what do you do now?
And now I work at the East-West Center here in Honolulu. I coordinate short-term professional development programs for journalists from Asia and the United States, and also young leaders from Asia Pacific and the United States.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for being on this program.
Thank you, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
Good night. Thanks for watching. Watch again for Bring the World Home.
Птичь